everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update on social media. A lot going on this week. Judicial Watch broke open another Biden administration scandal, cover-up, Nixonian, maybe tampering of evidence, it looks like, based on their own admissions. I'll talk about that and the Biden tapes. Hunter Biden is on trial. I guess maybe Joe's on trial in some ways as well. I'll give you an update there. Plus, Fauci testified about coronavirus, COVID, and vaccines and such on the Hill. I'll give you the latest on that and a new Judicial Watch lawsuit to get at the heart of the government response to coronavirus and what it should do next time around. I think first up, though, is the Hunter Biden scandal, the trial of Hunter Biden for falsely reporting on the federal gun registration form that he wasn't a drug addict and then having a gun improperly. I guess that's a second charge. That trial has begun, but not before it looked like to me there was an effort to put their thumb on the scales by Joe Biden, the President of the United States, and acting through his wife, Jill Biden. And this was Joe Biden's statement on the eve of the trial. The jury hadn't even been selected yet. And this is what Joe Biden said. Let's bring up Joe Biden's comment here. As I said, he's undermining the DOJ's prosecution. I am the president, but I'm also a dad. Jill and I love our son, and we're so proud of the man he is today. Hunter's resilience in the face of adversity and the strength he has brought to his recovery are inspiring to us. A lot of families have loved ones who have overcome addiction and know what we mean. As the president, I don't and won't comment on pending federal cases, but as a dad, I have boundless love for my son and confidence in him and respect for his strength. Our family has been through a lot together, and Jill and I are going to be there for Hunter and our family with our love and support. So, to me, that's just a signal to the jury that he's an addict and he's doing better, and if you prosecute him or find him guilty, you're harming him and you're harming me and Jill and the whole Biden family by doing that. And on top of that, Jill Biden shows up not just to attend the trial, but to attend the jury selection. And to me, that's a signal to the jury. Attending jury selection, this is what I tweeted, for Hunter sends an unmistakable political message to the jury. Joe is watching you. Joe is watching you. So this is and she's been there the entire trial. And some people say, well, that's fine. She's allowed to be there. It's her son. Or stepson. I don't know if did she adopt him? I don't think so. So I think it's her stepson. Either way, the Biden family has sent an unmistakable signal that they stand behind Hunter in this charge brought by the Biden Justice Department. And in the course of the trial, it was confirmed again that the laptop is real. The Hunter Biden laptop was introduced as evidence into the Hunter Biden trial. Now, if you raise questions about that laptop in 2020, the big social media companies censored you. Remember, we did a whole documentary on it here at Judicial Watch, Censored and Controlled. You had Twitter throw off the New York Post from Twitter after it first exposed the Hunter laptop. You had the 51 deep staters working with the Biden campaign, pretend that it was Russia disinformation. And this laptop that the laptop that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden desperately so wanted to suppress during the election, the FBI had since 2019. Again, reconfirmed at the trial this week. So I think I had a tweet up mentioning this is another matter. But I did talk about promoting our video on the Twitter files, right? The Twitter files exposed the incredible censorship of the New York Post and others who were concerned about what this Hunter Biden laptop showed. And they were targeted, maligned, suggested that they were Russian. It was suggested they were Russian agents or stooges if they promoted this material. And the Biden Justice Department just confirmed and introduced this whole laptop as evidence in federal court to try to jail Hunter Biden. And the Biden team had suggested that there was tampering of the files. You couldn't be sure what was what. And the FBI said no. Hunter's attorney, this is a quote from Breitbart, Abby Lowell who's a sharp attorney, so it's not like Hunter's being represented by someone who doesn't know what he's doing, tried to undermine the credibility of the laptop on cross-examination. Did you find out if any of the files had been tampered with? He asked Jensen, who was the FBI witness. I did not, she replied. So the Hunter laptop has been confirmed officially for the first time, and it's now court evidence, again, against Hunter by the Biden FBI and Justice Department. And it's now 2024, and they've been sitting on it since 2019. And one way to manipulate an election or to interfere with an election is to suppress evidence about one candidate in a obviously malicious way through abuse, which is what they did with the Hunter laptop. In a way that was helpful to him. I mean, there's little doubt that Joe Biden would have won the election, and I use the word won in quotes because I dispute that he won fair and square, or that the legal votes if counted would have resulted in his ascension to the presidency, but that dispute's been resolved in his favor, right? He's president. But I think he would have, history shows, he would have been the loser, and Trump would be president right now, but for the suppression of that laptop. I mean, there are many ways to rig an election. One way to rig an election is by doing what they did with the laptop. And as I noted later, as the tweet earlier showed, under the Trump rules, suppressing a story is election interference. Trump got indicted for it, prosecuted. He's facing jail time for it. Now, will they go after Joe Biden and all the rest who conspired to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story? I doubt it. So I don't know what's going to happen with this Hunter Biden trial. It is a Delaware jury. It's obviously a hometown crowd for the Bidens. I don't see how he gets off with an innocent guilt, with a verdict of acquittal or an acquittal. Unless the jury just ignores all the evidence. He obviously was addicted when he signed that form. And of course, a lot of this could have been handled in the ordinary course, maybe even not with a federal prosecution. I'm somewhat sympathetic to Hunter that he's being prosecuted on these charges. But it's a mess he made, right? He could have pled guilty to something lesser. There could have been an honest plea agreement. Instead, all of this was suppressed by his father's buddies in the deep state. And as I've mentioned last week, the only reason this material is coming forward, this prosecution came forward, was because Judicial Watch helped expose the FBI and Secret Service involvement in this, and the political pressure grew, especially because the brave judge hearing this case blew up the plea agreement. So this is the kind of de minimis type of federal prosecution that resulted. Now, there's a pending federal prosecution out in California related to IRS charges that was constructed in a way so as to protect Joe. And I talked about the current crisis for Joe Biden on Mornings with Maria on Fox Business earlier this week. Let's go.
Joining me now is Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton. Tom, great to see you. Thanks so much for being here. You know, it's hard not to compare everything that happened in the Hunter Biden trial to everything we just went through with the Trump trial. Your reaction to all of this?
Well, it's the result of a failed cover-up, really, and corruption by the Justice Department and the FBI that tried to bury this charge for years. Remember, Hunter committed this crime allegedly in 2018. Now it's 2024. And the only reason this trial is proceeding is because it was exposed by the worker groups like Judicial Watch, exposing the Secret Service and the FBI involvement in covering this up. And then, of course, the judge handling this case blew up the plea agreement by asking some basic questions about why was Hunter given unprecedented get-out-of-jail-free card. But it's still being compromised by the involvement of Mr. Biden, President Biden, and Jill Biden. I mean, if you're a juror and you show up for jury duty yesterday and the First Lady is sitting in the courtroom, what must be going through your head? And then on top of that, you have the President of the United States in a federal criminal trial against his son issue a statement that basically echoes the defense argument, he's a poor addict and we got to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Boy, oh boy. Yeah, boy, oh boy is right. And if you're Biden or Hunter, you're sitting there thinking, boy, my father's Justice Department is prosecuting me on this. Why don't I get pardoned? You got to wonder what's in it for Hunter to kind of tolerate this without screaming from the mountaintops. Well, because he's facing other legal liabilities involving his father. I mean, he simultaneously seems to be being thrown on under the bus while being protected in some ways. The House just issued, or not the House, but 3 committee chairmen in the House of Representatives just referred in an escalation of the criminal liabilities for the Bidens, just referred Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's brother James to the Justice Department and the special counsel that's supposedly investigating the Biden gang, Mr. Weiss, for perjury and making false statements to Congress. I have here the letter, and the letter we'll post below, and it has an attachment showing all the evidence warranting the prosecution. And the letter reads as follows: the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, the House Committee on Judiciary, and the House Committee on Ways and Means, 3 of the most powerful committees in the House, are investigating whether sufficient grounds exist to draft articles of impeachment against President Biden for consideration by the full House. I don't know how long you're going to take to figure that out. I would have figured it out by now. Impeachment's kind of being stalled, which is, I guess I could go off on a tangent there, complaining about the stalling and leaving impeachment on dying on the vine, seemingly. Maybe this is a way of distracting from that. Specifically, the committees are investigating the president's role in the knowledge of his family's international influence peddling schemes that have generated over $18 million for Biden family members and their related companies, and over $27 million when including the payments to their business associates, who were often used to transfer funds to Biden family members. This figure doesn't include an additional $8 million in loans, most of which has not been repaid, to Robert Hunter and Brian Biden, James Biden, the president's son and brother, respectively. In total, since 2014, the committees have accounted for over $35 million received by the Biden family members, their companies and business associates, which includes financial transactions described as, quote, loans, unquote. Actually, it doesn't say quote. I added that. Despite much effort, the committees have not identified legitimate services warranting such lucrative payments. They say the amount of money the Biden family has received from concerning companies and individuals is alarming. In furtherance of the impeachment inquiry, though, the committees have interviewed multiple witnesses regarding President Biden's knowledge of and involvement in his family's business dealings. That included James Biden and Hunter. The committees attached to this letter a referral for criminal charges against Hunter Biden and James Biden under 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, false statements, and additionally for Hunter Biden under 18 U.S.C. Section 1621, perjury. Hunter and James Biden made provably false statements to the Oversight Committee and the Judiciary Committee about key aspects of the impeachment inquiry in what appears to be a conscious effort to hinder the investigation's focus on Joe Biden. So it was done to protect Joe. As I noted, the referral was to over false statements and perjury made essentially to protect Joe from being exposed in this racketeering operation. And here are the specifics. Hunter Biden falsely distanced himself from a corporate entity, Rosemont Seneca Bohai, and its bank account that was the recipient of millions of dollars from foreign individuals and foreign entities who met with then Vice President Biden, and after transmitting money to the Rosemont Seneca Bohai bank account that then transferred funds to Hunter Biden. Biden made additional false statements as to whether he held positions at Rosemont Seneca Bohai. After deposing Hunter, the committees obtained documents showing Hunter Biden represented that he was the corporate secretary. Additionally, Hunter, during his testimony, relayed an entirely fictitious account about threatening text messages he sent to his Chinese business partner while invoking his father's presence with him when he wrote the messages. Hunter Biden told the Oversight Committee and Judiciary Committee he transmitted this threat to an unrelated individual with the same surname. However, documents released by the Committee on Ways and Means demonstrate conclusively that Hunter Biden made this threat to the intended individual, and the bank records prove Hunter Biden's Chinese business partners wired millions of dollars to him after the threat. A portion of the proceeds has been traced to Joe Biden's bank account. So Joe was sitting there. Hunter threatened his Chinese partner by mentioning that Joe essentially was the man, and they got money, and some of that money ended up magically in Joe Biden's bank account. And Hunter, according to this, lied about it all. With respect to James Biden, he stated unequivocally during his transcribed interview that Joe Biden did not meet with Mr. Tony Bobulinski, a business associate of James and Hunter Biden, in 2017, while pursuing a deal with a Chinese entity, CEFC China Energy. Specifically, James Biden stated he did not attend a meeting with Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and Tony Bobulinski on May 2nd, 2017 at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. These statements are contradicted not only by Mr. Bobulinski, but Hunter Biden. Hunter provided information. There's information from Hunter somehow that his uncle lied. Bobulinski also produced text messages that established the events leading up to and immediately following his meeting with Joe Biden on May 2nd, 2017. They made materially false Hunter and James made materially false statements to the Oversight and Judiciary Committee. The nature of these false statements is not lost on the committees. Every instance implicates Joe Biden's knowledge of and role in his family's influence peddling. Hunter Biden denying his affiliation with the Rosemont Seneca Bohai bank account obfuscates the account to which foreign individuals who met with Joe Biden transmitted funds. Similarly, Hunter creating from whole cloth a fiction in which he transmitted a threat to the wrong individual appears to be an attempt to hide the fact that invoking Joe Biden succeeded in coercing his Chinese partners to send him money. Also calls into doubt Hunter's other testimony about that event, such as his contention that his father was not, in fact, sitting next to him when he transmitted the message. James Biden's denial that Joe Biden's meeting with James Biden, Hunter Biden, and Hunter Biden's business associate for a Chinese transaction, Tony Bobulinski, took place, despite evidence being placed in front of him and being given multiple opportunities to amend his response, appears to be a clumsy attempt to protect Joe Biden from the reality that Joe Biden has indeed met with his family's business associates. So what do you think the Justice Department under Joe Biden is going to do with this referral? Nothing. I don't know, maybe the special counsel, he may think, well, you know, Joe Biden's on the way out. He seems to be losing in the polls. Maybe I will investigate this. But either way, even if, let's put it this way, if the Biden administration, which is what I presume will happen, squelches this, squashes it, quashes it, you can have the next administration, assuming President Trump wins, and I don't know if that's going to be the case, but the next administration can look at this issue as well. So this could be an opportunity for a Trump administration to pursue some accountability for Biden family criminality as alleged in this referral. So in the meantime, again, Congress has got to get its act together and shut down these abuses of Trump. And I encourage you to let your members of Congress know what you think about their failures to deal with this. Sending referrals is good. It's not sufficient. Sending a subpoena to Bragg is good. It's not sufficient. Much more needs to be done to protect the Republic from the lawfare that's going on right now. So, and of course, it's, again, Judicial Watch, our heavy lifting is getting some significant results. There's really historic results in the form of an admission by the Justice Department that the transcripts of the audio of the interviews that Joe Biden was subject to in the special counsel investigation of his mishandling of classified information and theft, the transcripts were messed with. They don't reflect accurately what was in the audio. Now, we all kind of guessed that was going to be the case because it explained why they were so desperate to hide this information from us. Why it is that Attorney General Garland is willing to go to jail in theory over this. He could be found in contempt of Congress, assuming Congress gets its act together, at least the House does, for failing to obey a subpoena from the House to turn those audio tapes and other material over. And what happened is late Friday, it was at 11 o'clock at night last Friday, the government filed a brief. It was an extraordinary brief, extraordinary not in a good way, extraordinary in a bad way, meaning they put forth a lot of new arguments that really had no basis in law as best we could see to withhold these audio tapes from you, the American people. And included in this filing was a confession by a lawyer who did the right thing. Because you can imagine they were very nervous about what they found. But, you know, there is sometimes ethics that still emerges now and again from the Justice Department. And the lawyer who admitted to this, you know, he tried to downplay it a little bit, but the admission was going to be, they must have known it was going to be pretty powerful in terms of its impact in the public discussion about this. The Nixonian messing around with tapes. I mean, this is the file. This is a simple FOIA. This is a simple, by the way, we're asking for one document. The audios. I think they got 2 tapes. Maybe it's 4 tapes, but they just have a few tapes. Because they had 2 recordings going. And they had 2 interviews, so maybe they're 4 tapes. Well, either way. And this is what they filed. This is what, 800 pages? Is that what you told me, Matt? 800 pages. I don't, after handling these documents, I don't need to go to the gym today. And in the documents, they say, I've never seen anything like this in the context of FOIA. We can't have them, because the audios, because executive privilege. Executive privilege doesn't apply in this context to withholding documents. Executive privilege typically is for advice sought by and received by the President of the United States. Not an interview of something that's, first of all, the transcript is public, as they want to remind us every 3 minutes. An interview of a president in a criminal investigation. He wasn't seeking advice when Hur questioned him. Now, to go back, the reason they don't want this audio released, it's clear, is because it shows that Joe Biden has significant cognitive challenges, and that Hur was fair in saying that it shows that, you know, he has no memory based on these audios and his interaction with them. And that's a political negative for him. I mean, I don't know why he thinks it says. I mean, have you seen videos of him walking around and his reaction? To questions and just being out of it. There's a Wall Street Journal piece today, devastating analysis of his behind-the-scenes behavior, which mimics his. I think I tweeted the first line of it up. I don't know. Do we still have that, Sean? Yeah, behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping. So here's the first line. Let's go to the first line. This is in the Wall Street Journal. When President Biden met with congressional leaders in the West Wing in January to negotiate a Ukraine funding deal, he spoke so softly at times that some participants struggled to hear him, according to 5 people familiar with the meeting. He read from notes to make obvious points, paused for extended periods, and sometimes closed his eyes for so long that some in the room wondered whether he had tuned out. So they're describing not me running these weekly updates. It's the President of the United States in meetings with senior levels of government, senior leaders of government. Now, the story goes on in that regard. Time magazine had similar language in their big interview with President Biden as well. And I guess the audio is just going to further confirm all of this, right? So that's why they're coming up with all these scam arguments to withhold this information from us under FOIA. But Judicial Watch filed the first lawsuit on this. Heritage followed up with a lawsuit a month later. And CNN and I think 12 or 13 other media companies are now with us in this lawsuit as well. But we broke open this case and forced them to come back with extraordinary political and lawless arguments to justify something that's indefensible, which is the withholding of this audio. So executive privilege doesn't apply. They say privacy applies. It doesn't apply. And the president he's not a private figure. The transcript's out. He's one of the most public figures in the history of the world. What privacy interest does he have in this? And isn't the public interest in knowing why Hur did what he did? By the way, Hur gave him a get-out-of-jail-free card based on this analysis that his memory was false. And they're denying his memory was false, the Biden White House. So we want to know what the truth is. And the audio, her relied upon in order to hide this from us. And the kicker is, they were telling us the transcript's good enough. It's an accurate recitation of what went on. And in the course of this brief, there is an extraordinary admission by a senior lawyer in the Justice Department. I have to get the whole thing. I mean, he's not just a senior lawyer, he's like the senior lawyer in the Justice Department. Let me go to the... So in FOIA cases, oftentimes they'll have an official kind of go under oath to explain the basis or bolster the basis for withholding a particular document. I mean, never has so much ink been spilled to hide just one document. Really, I mean, exaggerating, but I think it's really true. So Bradley Weisenheimer, it's not Weisenheimer, excuse me, it's Weinsheimer. He's Associate Deputy Attorney General for the Department of Justice. He serves as the highest ranking career official in the department. So he is the most senior lawyer in the Justice Department in terms of the career civil service. So there are political appointees, obviously, he reports to. But he's the top of the top in terms of the career civil service in the Justice Department. And he makes this confession, and I'm sure it pained him to do so. On page 13 and 14, excuse me, not 13, paragraphs 13 and 14. After the interview, special counsel's office, these are the interviews with Biden, created written transcripts of the audio recording with the assistance of a trained professional court reporter, one transcript for each day of the interview. I have read the entirety of the written transcripts of the interview. As I listened to the audio recording, I compared it to the transcripts of the audio recording and specifically listened for differences between the transcripts and the audio recording. In a few instances, the transcripts indicate that some words from the audio recording are indiscernible. In listening to the audio recording and reviewing the transcripts, I agree that in those instances the words are indiscernible. So the words are indiscernible, no one can hear what they are. And that sometimes happens in audios. The interview transcripts are accurate transcriptions of the words of the interview contained in the audio recording, except for minor instances such as the use of filler words, such as or ah, when speaking that are not always reflected on the transcripts, or when words may have been repeated when spoken, such as I, and, but sometimes was only listed a single time in the transcripts. Besides these exceedingly minor differences, based on my simultaneous review of the transcripts while listening to the audio recording, the transcripts accurately captured the words spoken during the interview on the audio recording with no material differences between the audio recording and transcripts. Well, that I don't believe. None of the minor differences included any audible substantive changes. That is, based on my review, there is no material omission. Material there, that's a big word in the legal sense, doing a lot of work there. Material omission of words between the audio recording and transcripts. Special Counsel Hur and FBI personnel who attended the interview and compared the audio recording to the transcripts also informed me of their determination that the transcripts accurately reflect the words spoken on the audio recording, aside from the minor instances I described above. Special Counsel Hur emphasized to me that it was important for purposes of his investigation that the interview transcripts be accurate. Now, that is a confession that the transcript is inaccurate and has been tampered with, in the sense that it's not an accurate recitation and reflection, and there's nothing ordinary about it. I responded over the weekend, I had to do a quick response because of the breaking news. Here's what I said initially.
Breaking news, the Biden administration just admitted they messed with the transcript of Joe Biden's audio interviews with the special counsel, Robert Hur. You may recall he doesn't want to turn the audios over. He's citing executive privilege. He's citing personal privacy as well. And Judicial Watch has sued for these records, the audios, in federal court. And they just filed a brief last night, 11 p.m. on a Friday, saying the audio transcripts are not accurate. They deleted words like or what he double spoke, like and, or I, kind of like a stutter. All of that obviously helps him politically and for his campaign. And it's not ordinary. It's not normal. Legal transcripts, interview transcripts, deposition transcripts are not supposed to be altered in this fashion. And it's a real scandal. It's a Nixonian scandal. Don't you agree? So in addition to kind of fighting for the release of these records in the FOIA case that Judicial Watch is pursuing that forced this admission to what everyone suspected, that they were messing with the transcript to protect Joe, we just filed a new FOIA request to investigate that Nixonian tampering with evidence.
And this is what I said in the press release. Wow, Judicial Watch's FOIA lawsuit forced the Biden team to admit what everyone suspected, that the transcript is not accurate, was changed in a way to help Biden. There's nothing ordinary about this, and the transcript inaccuracy issues seem to help Biden's political campaign needs. We today initiated a new FOIA request on the Biden's Nixonian, on this Biden's Nixonian tape scandal. So we've got the FOIA lawsuit. Now we have a new FOIA request to figure out what the heck went on in terms of the cover-up in the new FOIA lawsuit we just filed, or we've been pursuing. And Attorney General Garland, who's yet to be held in contempt for hiding this material, was questioned about this, and this was his song and dance. Who was the congresswoman who posted this? Anna Paulina. I always screw up her last name. Luna. Well, either way, I'll get her name right by the end of the video.
We have gone beyond precedent to provide the committee with the transcripts of the special counsel's interview with the president. But we have made clear that we will not provide audio recordings from which the transcripts that you already have were created.
And with respect to the actual audio recordings sought by the majority, the Department of Justice has produced full and complete transcripts of the conversations memorialized by these recordings. Is that correct?
It is.
There's been an allegation that the transcripts might have been altered in some way. Is there any truth to that allegation?
There's no truth to that. The senior career official in the department, in a declaration he filed under oath, stated that he had compared the audio to the transcript, and that it is an accurate transcript is accurate with the exceptions of us and ahs and repetitions of words like I and. Transcript is accurate with the exceptions of us and ahs and repetitions of words like I and.
The Department of Justice has produced full and complete transcripts of the conversations memorialized by these recordings. Is that correct?
With the exceptions of us and ahs and repetitions of words like I and.
Yeah, that was from Anna Paulina Luna's Twitter feed. And look, if you're trying to get full information about the credibility of a witness, you want to see and hear them generally. If you can't see them, you want to hear them. And someone like Joe Biden or anyone else who is constantly pausing for long periods of time, stutters over words, pauses over words, you need to hear that. And when you start taking away words that a witness says, and by the way, the transcript doesn't take away all those multiple words. There are times where he does say I, or someone says I, and they leave it in, which raises additional questions. Well, why was that left in and others taken out? the seeming answer that I think we should fairly conclude is that it was designed to make Joe seem more sensible and cognitively with it than he actually is. I mean, who are they fooling by suggesting otherwise? The transcript's inaccurate except for the transcript's accurate except for the places where it's inaccurate. And inaccurate in a way that seems to benefit Biden politically. Legally, it was wired. I mean, he committed the crime, and they didn't prosecute him while they instead prosecuted Trump for the same type of alleged crime. So it didn't really matter what he was saying. They weren't going to prosecute him. I think that's my conclusion. So this is purely political. Political manipulation of evidence. Tampering, altering. What word? I want you to put all the synonyms for tampering, evidence tampering, spoliation. What other words can you come up with? But then it gets crazier. For the first time in the history of man, the Justice Department has made the argument that we can't have access to government records because someone might use them to create AI deepfakes. Specifically, they can create AI deepfakes, artificial intelligence deepfakes, of Joe Biden's voice using the audios. I mean, just think about that crazy assertion. First of all, there's no basis in law to hide records that we're due to get under law because someone might manipulate those records. That's true for any FOIA record. It would end FOIA if that were the new standard. Because it's an audio that can be manipulated, documents can be manipulated. Joe Biden speaks every day. Think of all the words he's spoken. We don't need that audio to do even a deep fake of the transcript. Someone could just release it right now, and people would think it would be true. And it doesn't matter. It's the First Amendment either way. The passage of time, this is the argument they use. This is the crazy argument, completely made up out of whole cloth in terms of law. There's no law behind it. As I said, if it were followed, it would end FOIA. We couldn't get any documents. The passage of time and advancements in audio, artificial intelligence, and deepfake technologies only amplifies concerns about malicious manipulation of audio files. It's purely a political concern. It's not a legal concern. If the audio recording is released here, it is easy to foresee that it could be improperly altered, and that the altered file could be passed off as an authentic recording and widely distributed. For example, a malicious actor, or maybe someone just making satire, could slow down the speed of the recording, or maybe a political opponent trying to make a point by slowing down the speed of the recording, or insert words that President Biden did not say, or delete words that he did say. As I said, that can be done already with or without this recording, and it's no legal basis to withhold the material. The problem is made worse by the fact that there is now widely available technology that can be used to create entirely different audio deepfakes based on a recording. Right. And it can be used to create the thing they're worried about right now. Or they're pretending to be worried about. I mean, this is kind of this is an argument I'm scratching my head over because there's no law behind it. So they're just asking for a new exemption under FOIA that doesn't make any sense. And it's so, to me, it's obviously political and craven, but there's this little hint. I kind of see it as because the Biden gang has, and Obama is, by the way, running their AI control operation. He's helping them develop policy. You may not know that, but it's true. He's been appointed. He's been helping them on that. They're desperate to control outputs of AI, and they use this deepfake misinformation model as a reason to censor and control AI outputs. Now, I don't need to tell you why the government controlling AI outputs and forcing and pushing private sector to censor AI outputs is anathema to the First Amendment and freedom and free speech. So I think this kind of semi-obsession, they're trying to run an argument in part through this brief. But either way, it's pretty extraordinary because it's no reason to withhold government information from you, my fellow American. And they quote a Washington Post story. So the Washington Post is the law here. Rapid advances in artificial intelligence have made it easy to generate believable audio, allowing anyone to copy somebody's voice, leading to a flood of fake content on the web. To be sure, other raw materials, and this is the admission that Tom Fitton's right, or that anyone else with a modicum of common sense, modicum of common sense, is right. To be sure, other raw material to create a deep fake of President Biden's voice is already available. But release of the audio recording presents unique risks. For public knowledge the audio recording had been released, it becomes easier for malicious actors to pass off an altered file as a true recording. That just makes no sense as a matter of law. I'm not a lawyer. You don't have to be a lawyer to know you can't withhold government documents because someone might mess with the document in a way that changes the actual document, whether it be a recording or a piece of paper. This is Nixonian. I haven't seen such desperation to withhold an audio recording by an administration. Similar, that is so baseless. No law, no precedent behind much of what they're arguing here. Andy Biggs was the congressman from Arizona, had pursued this issue a little bit with Garland as well.
Now, your office has basically pled two things in court, claiming, number one, executive privilege, and number two, this kind of interesting novel approach saying deep fakes, AI.
You're mischaracterizing the filing. That was one of a substantial number of arguments made in a Freedom of Information.
Did they consult with you specifically about that idea, right, that notion where they were going to say something like, quote, this is from the pleading, the passage of time and advancements in audio artificial intelligence and deepfake technologies only amplify concerns about malicious manipulation of audio files, close quote. Did they consult with you about that provision?
I'm not going to talk about internal department deliberations. See, that was one of a large number of explanations in the document you're talking about.
Your attorney also said that you did alter the transcript, and they said it was filler words, repeat words, and, I. But you know what? We don't know whether he said there were blank times where there was silence. We don't know whether those were 1 minute long, 2 minutes long. We don't know if he sputtered for and, because those were edited out.
Yeah. So now it's going to be up to a federal judge to cut through this mess and morass. Our brief is due in a few weeks. I think it's due the end of the month, like the 26th or 27th or something. So our brief, we'll be filing briefs. I'm not quite sure if it's going to be a brief or briefs because there are 3 other parties that are joining with us to pursue these issues. We'll probably have our own brief. Heritage will be fighting, and we're working alongside CNN and all the liberal media. They want the truth here too. So all you lefties watching this, you can attack me and Judicial Watch for demanding this information, but what about CNN and all the media organizations, all the major media organizations that want this document too, these audio files too, and are going to be pushing back as strongly as Judicial Watch will be in demanding full access to this on behalf of their listeners, viewers, readers, and the American people. Government transparency, properly understood, unites really the left and the right in many ways. And I mean liberals and conservatives. The left is, I think the left, when I hear left, when I use the word left, I usually mean communist. But in this case, I mean liberals. So we'll see where this goes. It's going to be tough to get these documents in the meantime, or these audio tapes. Maybe political pressure will result in their release. But the Biden people, they don't care. We'll get some negative press, right? But then something else will come up. They'll indict Trump again or something crazy like that. Also testifying this week was Anthony Fauci, a man that Judicial Watch has repeatedly focused on because of his important role in the COVID response. He essentially became the most important government official in the response to COVID in terms of being an unelected official. I don't think there's any comparable non-elected government official who exercised so much political power and influence in the during the COVID era. I mean, you probably have to go to military conflicts, World War II or something, to find, bureaucrats who've exercised similar types of power in terms of the expanse and influence. But I don't think there's anyone comparable to Fauci in terms of exercising, in my view, virtually unchecked power. And he was excoriated, questioned by the House the other day on all sorts of issues. So let's go to what I thought was the most interesting one first, which was a congressman who's a doctor, I think it's Dr. McCormick from Pennsylvania, had audio of really disturbing words by Dr. Fauci as it relates to vaccine mandates.
I want to point out that I'm probably the only member of Congress that actually treated patients during the pandemic from the very beginning to the very end of the pandemic, during night shifts in the ER. Thousands of patients during that time. I was censored. My medical license was threatened because I disagreed with bureaucrats. Literally taken off the internet as a person who is treating patients with leading-edge technologies, developing theories, but doing my very best, but being censored by the United States government for the first time, stepping in and taking the place of medical professionals as the experts in healthcare.
You were going to have schools, universities, and colleges are going to say, you want to come to this college, buddy? You're going to get vaccinated. Lady, you're going to get vaccinated. Yeah. Big corporations like Amazon and Facebook and all of those others are going to say, you want to work for us, you get vaccinated. And it's been proven that when you make it difficult for people in their lives, they lose their ideological bullshit and they get vaccinated.
Are all objections to COVID vaccinations ideological bullshit? Dr. Fauci, you've become Dr. Fear.
The congressman is from Georgia, by the way. I was mistaken in saying he's from Pennsylvania. And but that was the approach. And Dr. McCormick was right in highlighting how what is now accepted analysis of COVID would have gotten you banned from the internet. And any, frankly, criticism of Dr. Fauci got you attacked. Now, I had noticed early on, I'm like, well, this Dr. Fauci seems to know what he's talking about. He seemed relatively sensible. So I wasn't as negative as I probably should have been or could have been early on. But, I take people as they are initially and see what happens. And it was clearly very interesting to me when I saw an email early on in the pandemic that Fauci sent to Hillary, or about Hillary. I don't remember the email specifically, but essentially saying, "We love you, Hillary." And I posted a link to the tweet with my arms crossed. I said, "Very well. Here's the video I posted with the tweet." Kind of. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? So that tweet. Can you bring up the actual tweet? Go back to the tweet that actually had the video in it. You can go back online. But anyway, here's what the New York Times reported. They actually covered that tweet. To show the crazed nature of the media's obsession with protecting Fauci, I present to you this loony New York Times piece on my tweet 4 years ago, noting how interesting it was Fauci sent an email praising Hillary. Mr. Fitton at Judicial Watch posted a tweet that showed Dr. Fauci's email and Mrs. Clinton. Fitton included a video of himself crossing his arms and saying, "Isn't that interesting?" It was retweeted more than 1,500 times, unquote. Quote. But that's got to be the weirdest New York Times citation of Judicial Watch and me that I've ever seen. And I probably, this is the video again. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? And the New York Times was describing it in a serious fashion. I mean, that's just beyond. But it shows you how quickly the media wanted to controversialize my little, there's the tweet. Click on the full, March, when was the tweet that I do it? When did I do the tweet? Go back, go up a little bit. March 21st, 2020. Scroll up, let's see what I said in the actual tweet. I didn't even comment on it. Fauci letter to Hillary Clinton surfaces. I don't think the tweet's up on that link anymore. But I didn't even comment on it. I just said, isn't that interesting? That's how sensitive they were about criticism of Dr. Fauci. And once that happened, and that wasn't, I think the Washington Post did a mention of it as well. So these are the two most powerful newspapers in the country, noting that I had issued the most mild analysis possible. Isn't that interesting? His sending an email praising Hillary. Certainly an indication, why is it, why do you think it's interesting? Of course you know why it's interesting. And they circled the wagons around Fauci. And so he's been protected. Part of it was because he was seen as antagonistic and an outsider for Trump. So it was part of this anti-Trump animus. It was during an election year. They wanted someone to make Trump look bad during an election year. That's what the left was planning. And a lot of this COVID mania was about putting people on edge, making it easier to change voting rules, in my view. I testified to Congress about this. In 2020, I saw what was coming. And a lot of the COVID response was nothing but a public health experiment, right? On you and on your children. So when it came to social distancing, there was no science. When it came to masks, there was no science. Certainly for young children, shutdowns, there was no science. In fact, I reviewed what the response plans were for a pandemic early on. And I kept on saying to anyone who would listen in government and publicly, why are you not doing what you said that you would do in the case of a pandemic? Which is, if there are specific instances of transmission where there's heavy transmission, you do a temporary shutdown. Nowhere in the history of man have you shut down entire societies to control a pandemic. Never has it been done before. And Fauci just threw it all out the window. And when he's testifying the other day and he's asked about this and the masks and such, he said, oh, that was the CDC. When in fact he was the political generalissimo when it came to everything on COVID. Here's Jim Jordan questioning him.
Do you agree that there was a push to downplay the lab leak theory?
Not on my part.
Really?
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
I think most of the country would find that amazing. I still got 11 seconds.
But look at the facts. I've kept an open mind throughout the entire process.
All right, I yield back.
And here's something about the masks.
And going back to what I said before, all of that is in the context of, at the time, 4,000 to 5,000
mandates for children under
people a
5,
day
there's
were
scientific
dying.
evidence for that?
Excuse me?
Mask mandates for children under 5, there's scientific evidence supporting that?
There was no study that did masks on kids before. You couldn't do the study. You had to respond
Right.
to an epidemic that was killing 4,000 to 5,000 Americans per
Vaccine
day.
mandates.
Non-pharmacological interventions should be studied before they're recommended. Because otherwise, the reason for doing a study isn't to say, thinking, well, this might work. The reason you do studies is not so to make sure not only that it will work, but people won't be harmed by the intervention. So it just can't be, well, let's see what happens. It has to be, let's see and make sure that anything we recommend won't harm people. So when you're telling children they have to be masked, the study has to be sure to reflect that they calculate if there's going to be harms and test for harms. If you're going to shut down schools as an experiment, again, a public health experiment, what are the harms? If you're going to shut down society, what are the harms? That's why I say you were experimented on. And now we know what the harms were. Destruction of our economy, untold deaths due to put off, which was, all of this, by the way, people were saying was going to happen. Generational impacts on student learning. Harm to the public health where people were put off dealing with health issues other than COVID. And then, of course, all the big lies about the vaccine. Yeah, lies. It was suggested it would stop transmission. And as we saw in the beginning of this segment, he didn't care. He just was interested in power. If you were concerned about your health, it was ideological. You were Trump, and you needed to be shut down or forced out of the military like Biden did, or get fired. I mean, remember, Biden wanted to fire people, and the Supreme Court pushed back on that if they weren't vaccinated. And Judicial Watch exposed, our FOIA lawsuits have been second to none in exposing what was going on with the vaccines. That they knew, because the big scam was, and this is what made me curious about the vaccines initially. So what made COVID potentially dangerous were these spike proteins, right? So the vaccine, novel vaccine, stimulated spike protein production. And don't worry, and the spike proteins, we were assured, wouldn't go throughout your body. Get the injection in the arm, and their theory was your lymph nodes here, that's where it essentially would stop. And you'd get the protection and benefits that way. In point of fact, the results, the testing showed that the spike proteins were showing up all over throughout the body. And that's why I was thinking, why is it that we're generating more spike proteins if they're dangerous? Stupid old me, right? What do I know? I'm not a scientist. I got to trust the science. And of course, my instincts were right, and the instincts of a lot of other smart people, or kind of dumb people like me, right? I'm joking. I'm not that dumb, but you know, I'm not a scientist. But you know what? As head of Judicial Watch for 26 years, I know a lot about public health. I know a lot about the politics of public health. I know when it came to vaccines that were politically controversial, rules were bent, lies were told, and the people were misled. And COVID wasn't the first time it happened, because Judicial Watch has been doing this for decades. We know what to look for, and sure enough, we found it. And we're taken off the internet, censored, to protect that man and his politics. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene got some guff because she wasn't terribly congressional in her approach to dealing with Dr. Fauci. I did a video watching a kind of excerpts of the fights she got in and the battle she got in with Fauci and her colleagues on the panel.
Do the American people deserve to be abused like that, Mr. Fauci? Because you're not doctor, you're Mr. Fauci in my few minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Point of order.
Just in terms of the rules of decorum, are we allowed to deny that a doctor is a doctor just because we don't want him to be a doctor?
Yes, because in my time, that man does not deserve to have a license. As a matter of fact, it should be revoked and he belongs in prison.
That's completely unacceptable to be able to deny Dr. Fauci, who's here, a respected member of the medical community, his title. And that's actually a personal attack on his character.
And I have instructed her.
He's not respected.
And I've instructed her to address him as a doctor.
I'm not addressing him as doctor.
Yeah, I think Fauci should be subject to criminal investigation over this gain-of-function fraud. Did he engage in the fraud? I don't know. Did he know about it? I don't know. But there was fraud, and I want to know who criminally is potentially responsible for it. And there should be an investigation. Now, Judicial Watch uncovered the FBI was looking into gain-of-function and concluded seemingly early on that it was gain-of-function research potentially that created COVID. They were nervous about it. Did they conclude it created COVID? No. But they concluded that gain-of-function research could develop viruses that would have no evidence that they had been manipulated by human hands. And Fauci, despite his dishonest answers again, that he was not dismissing gain-of-function, that he was not committing perjury when he said they weren't funding gain-of-function. I don't know how else to describe it other than being just misleading. And the legal question is, was it so misleading that it's perjury? I think he needs to be investigated for it. I mean, they were creating, under grants he signed off on, mutant coronaviruses. That's the language in the grant proposal. Mutant coronaviruses. And they poo-pooed the idea that it possibly had lab origins because, in my view, his agency would have been partly responsible if it came from a lab or if it was originated from that lab. because either viruses the lab was given money to work on, or the technique of gain of function that they were being trained on and getting practice with could be used to manipulate other viruses. You know, and gain of function needs to be shut down generally. I mean, it highlights why we should be concerned about this debate. It's worth having still, not because of what the Chinese did, that Fauci really played cover for, in my view, based on the documents we've uncovered. But gain of function still goes on. It's largely unpoliced. I mean, just because the government doesn't fund it doesn't mean it's not happening. And the government does fund what many consider to be gain of function. And we're not stopping investigating and holding accountable the government for what went on during COVID. We just filed this new lawsuit against HHS, which is the agency under which Fauci worked, for records on the preparations for and the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We asked, I think, almost 2 years for these documents, so this is we took a while to get around to this. Records and or communications of the Assistant Secretary of Preparedness and Response, Department of Health and Human Services, that refer to and or document any after-action reports, lessons learned, after-action reviews, reviews of procedures, analysis, studies, hot washes concerning preparing and or responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Like, why didn't we follow? I went to see the documents explaining why didn't they follow the plans for dealing with a pandemic and just make it up as they go along because it sounded good. 6 feet sounded good. Masks sound good. The Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response coordinates the Strategic National Stockpile, which distributes medicine and medical supplies if local supplies run out during a public health emergency. In October 2023, the Inspector General's Office of HHS issued a report titled "The Strategic National Stockpile was not positioned to respond effectively to the COVID-19 pandemic." We've spent millions prepping for pandemics. And Fauci's agencies, his colleagues, HHS, didn't really have the money spent and prepare us in a way if the pandemic was even worse than it was. We were caught flat-footed because the prep work hadn't been done. The report made several recommendations. Mitigate the risk presented by relying on foreign supply chains and just-in-time inventory strategies when determining annual stockpile purchases. So a stockpile isn't much of a stockpile if you buy it the day of the emergency, right? That's what they were doing. I'm exaggerating, but that's what that language means. Develop a strategic plan for the stockpile that clearly defines the goals and objectives of the stockpile and the stockpile's roles and responsibilities for responding to emergency events, including pandemics. Work to increase the annual funding to keep pace with the increased responsibilities of the stockpile. I mean, this is the disconnect between reality and government and what we're being told to worry about. They want to scare us about these pandemics, but when it comes to doing the basic work to prepare for them, they don't want to do it because that's real work and that's hard work. We saw that with the pandemic with COVID, and I guarantee you they're not ready to go for a potential other pandemic that gets people panicked. As I say, the Fauci-led federal response to the pandemic was panicked, political, and harmed the lives and liberties of Americans. And we need more information on how that disaster came about. So what's going to happen to Dr. Fauci? I don't know. I mean, as I say, I think he should be criminally investigated in part over this gain of function fraud. But one thing we should ensure as a public is that there's no more Dr. Fauci's, in the sense that no government official who is unelected should have the type of power that Dr. Fauci has ever again. We elect a president. His cabinet officials are appointed by the president, confirmed by the United States Senate, which is a check, and involvement of Congress in our governance. See, that's called self-government. But putting bureaucrats effectively above appointed officials confirmed by the Senate or above the president, that's not the way a republic's supposed to operate. So I use the word I use the phrase no more Dr. Fauci's in the sense that this was a man who had too much power in a democratic, I'm allowed to say that word, aren't I? Constitutional republic. And I think there should be accountability for any misconduct he committed while there. And we've got these FOIA issues that have come up that Congress is outraged about that. We are too, because it's our cases. When the FOIA lady, the top FOIA official, is telling Fauci's aides on how to avoid FOIA, I'm surprised Judicial Watch got anything. And by the way, just so you know, Fauci, says that he abides by FOIA and he didn't do anything wrong with respect to FOIA. And I don't have evidence he did, but I do know the government, in stalling the release of records to us, told us that the reason they had to stall the release of records and it would slow the release of records was because Fauci and his team needed to directly review all the documents Judicial Watch was getting. And that was pretty extraordinary based on our experience. We didn't necessarily, FOIA, they don't tell us, well, you can't get these records as quickly as you want, as the law requires, because the head of the agency is getting involved. That was mighty unusual. Fauci's involvement in our FOIAs. The government told us he was involved. It's a lot going on. But as you can see, Judicial Watch once again is in the center of the storm when it comes to exposing, stopping government corruption, holding government officials accountable. The President of the United States, Dr. Fauci, Attorney General Garland, you name it, Judicial Watch is in court holding all those powerful government officials accountable on your behalf so that you can know what the government's up to, and they are reminded that no one is above the law. With that, I'll see you here next time on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.